Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. So this was an interesting week on the Hot 100. I'm hesitating to call it a great week or even a good one. The fall turbulence is continuing and I'm not sure all the results are all that good just yet. But the more I think about some of the trends here, the more I'm seeing things start to recover a little bit, especially in terms of the songs that are rotating in and out right about now. And while there are a couple trouble spots, believe me, we'll get to them, overall this didn't seem all that bad this week, right? Well, let's find out a little bit more and start off with our top 10. Once again, Closer by the Chainsmokers featuring Halsey is at the number 1, but again, that's not gonna change because even though the radio gains are starting to even off a little bit, it's got so much sales and streaming traction that it barely even matters at this point. Unless we get a serious smash hit, I don't see it getting unseated anytime soon either, particularly not by Heathens by 21 Pilots, which remains at number 2 because merely being good enough across the board at this point isn't enough to take number 1. Again, its closest competition is Cold Water by Major Lazer featuring Justin Bieber and Mia, which continues to pick up a lot of airplay and streaming, but it did slip on YouTube and sales were not great this week, so it might remain stuck at number 3. And it's got to face off with the other song featuring Justin Bieber in the top 10, Let Me Love You by DJ Snake, which rose up to number 4 on a lot of airplay momentum and good streaming and sales. A little bit stalled out on YouTube, but that'll probably change with a full video. Now, it pushed back Cheap Thrills by Sia featuring Sean Paul to number 5, but that's not really surprising. Unsteady losses despite being at the top in airplay and weakening in all other categories. The only reason that it's currently above Treat You Better by Shawn Mendes, rose up to number 6 this week, is airplay inertia and the grace of a loving God, because it's getting soundly beaten on streaming by this junk and matched on sales. Now, Shawn Mendes also jumped past Don't Let Me Down by the Chainsmokers featuring Daya, and I'm choosing to believe it's more because of the weaknesses on that song than the strengths of Treat You Better. Most because sales had continued to drop off and good streaming can't compete for weak airplay forever. It's getting stuck at number 7. But this will take us to our new top 10 entry, and arguably the most bizarre of them, Broccoli by Dram featuring Lil Yachty. Yeah, I know, it's basically the bargain barrel version of a Chance the Rapper song, and Lil Yachty remains the weakest element of this track. I can't really stand him all that much, but you know what? I actually kind of like this. I don't hate this song, especially given that hook is really infectious and that 2016's been pretty lousy for mainstream hip-hop. Even if it's only here thanks to streaming, I'm gonna take it. I'll take this over We Don't Talk Anymore by Charlie Puth featuring Selena Gomez, which will re-enter the top 10 at number 9, basically on mediocre radio and better than expected sales. Joy. Finally, we've got the lingering gasps of This Is What You Came For by Calvin Harris featuring Rihanna, as it burns off its remaining airplay with just enough YouTube to cling on to number 10 as sales and streaming kind of evaporate beneath it. It's gonna be gone soon, no worries. And on that pleasant note, our losers and dropouts. And I gotta say, I'm pretty damn pleased with our dropouts this week. Rise by Katy Perry, Make Me by Britney Spears featuring G-Eazy, Child's Play by Drake, Don't Mind by Kent Jones, She's Got a Way with Words by Blake Shelton, and finally proving that the American public might have some taste after all, Deja Vu by Post Malone featuring Justin Bieber had no staying power whatsoever after debuting last week. It's gone. Sure, along the way we also lost American Country Love Song by Jake Owen and Stressed Out by 21 Pilots, but the former was near the end of its run anyways and the latter's been around nearly all year, so I'm not really complaining all that much. And truth be told, I'm not all that fussed about a lot of our losers here either. I'm not gonna complain that I Got the Keys by DJ Khaled with Jay-Z and Future's dying at 78, or Make You Miss Me by Sam Hunt flopped down to 72, or What You Mean I by Day Day was mostly forgotten at 83, or Purple Lamborghini by Skrillex and Rick Ross slid down to 90, or The Greatest by Sia and Kendrick Lamar lost all its momentum from last week and can be kind of forgettable down at 34, or that Me Too by Meghan Trainor is finally on its way out at 66. Now, I'm not gonna say it's all great news. That Part by Schoolboy Q featuring Kanye West went down to 83 after a pretty respectable run, and Fade by Kanye West featuring Ty Dolla $ign and Post Malone fell down to 62. Man, it was a bad week for Kanye here. Another one, 2 in a row. And Peter Pan by KELSEA Ballerini slid off its gains and its sales discount down to 54, which isn't a great sign, especially 17 weeks in for that song. Similar case for All in My Head Flex by Fifth Harmony featuring Fetty Wap, which is falling to number 63 at 14 weeks in, which is earlier than I had hoped. I like that song. And finally, just as I predicted, Lady Gaga's Perfect Illusion fell hard to 42, even despite the release of the video. It's got no no radio momentum, and that's a killer to songs like this. It's not a good sign leading up to the album coming out next month, which, yes, of course, I will be reviewing. Now, this takes us to our gains and returning entries, arguably the biggest mixed bag we have here. On the one hand, I'm not happy that LOCKJAW by French Montana featuring Kodak Black came back, but it is only at 100, and it got beaten by Goosebumps, Travis Scott, and Kendrick Lamar back at 97. As for our gains, look, it's not a good sign at all when the best of them is either You Look Like I Need a Drink by Justin Moore up to 80, or the clunky but okay May We All by Florida Georgia Line featuring Tim McGraw up to 74, or Black Beatles by Ray Shermer featuring Gucci Mane up to 77, which, yeah, it's not that bad. But the rest of these come with a little bit of that perspective. Yeah, it's not good that garbage like One Night by Lil Yachty's up to 70, or X by 21 Savage, Metro Boomin, and Future's up to 84, or that Country is Pushing Junk Like Move by Luke Bryan up to 71, or the increasingly sterile Blue Ain't Your Color by Keith Urban up to 60. With the exception of the last song there, I don't really see any crossover potential for any of these songs, so I don't really see any of them becoming consistent hits with any real traction here. The only song that kind of concerns me is Ooh by Young Ma continuing to rise up to 52. Did not expect that, but I suspect it's only here because of the residual beat between Meek Mill and The Game, and it's getting remixed into a lot of the diss tracks, and since that sort of flame war is kind of dying down, it really was something watching The Game destroy Meek Mill so much more effectively than Drake ever could. I can see that song Ooh fading as a result, so props to The Game, he got rid of another bad song. But now we've got to dig into our new arrivals, and ooh boy, we got an interesting pack today, starting off with number 91, Cancer by 21 Pilots.
Lips a chapter faded, call my lips a chapter faded, kiss you. Lips a chapter faded, call my lips a chapter faded.
Okay, you're gonna have to follow me on this one. As I'm sure so many of you probably already know, this is a cover of a My Chemical Romance song originally released as a part of their big mainstream breakthrough, The Black Parade. Yes, MCR fans, I know 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge had some crossover success with Helena and it did go platinum, but Welcome to the Black Parade was a song that broke the top 10 and helped push emo towards the forefront of pop culture in the mid-2000s. And yes, I know that MCR never considered themselves emo in the traditional sense, but they sure as hell rode the trend and the fashion. And you know what? On some level, it makes perfect sense that 21 Pilots would eventually cover them, given that both bands started on the outskirts of their respective genres, got dangerously overexposed despite some real critical acclaim. They made some good music and feature one of the most possessive fan bases in modern music. Anyway, this was a deep cut midway through that album, a song I liked but never quite loved in the same way as like The Sharpest Lives or Teenagers, a theatrical piano ballad that honestly felt a little bit broad but kind of fit the garish tone that the Black Parade was going for. 21 Pilots, on the other hand, well, they played straight and more reserved, stripping things down to a sparse, tapping bit of atmosphere glitch with more pitch-shifted vocals than there should be and none of the bombast, reworking parts of the lyrics into a fragmented chorus that honestly didn't do a lot for me, which I can pretty much say about the cover as a whole. You know, I hate to say this, but I think opting to play this more tastefully was probably the wrong strategy, not just because the gothic bombast of My Chemical Romance had more personality beyond Tyler Joseph's very willowy tones here, but the very sparse, brittle atmospherics also remind me a bit of Nick Cave and the Bad Seasons' most recent album, Skeleton Tree. In that comparison, Nick Cave just slaughters 21 Pilots. It's not even a contest. But look, this isn't a bad cover, particularly for the mainstream, but I got the impression that 21 Pilots could have done this a lot better. Just saying. Number 87, Key to the Streets by YFN Lucci featuring Migos and Trouble.
I got your horn leash, got a plug in Vietnamese. We the niggas that wanna be, cause we got the key to the streets. We got the key to the streets. Hey, we got the key to the street. Yeah, we got the key to the streets. Hey, we got the key to the street.
Okay, so some of you might think that my semi-recurring feature on this show surrounding your generic trap anthem might apply here. Half because outside of Atlanta, YFN Lucci doesn't really have a lot of buzz that I've heard, and half because we got 2/3 of Migos on this song. But believe it or not, there's a little bit more actually going on here. For one, the sparse pianos punctuated with some distant echoing screams set up a pretty solid solid atmosphere, especially when against the drill-like hi-hats. And the added synth layering isn't bad here either. And sure, Quavo is saying on the hook he has your girl on a leash, and that's all sorts of questionable, even in a song about dealing cocaine. But I actually like the subtle shifts in flow that he had on his verse, and when YF and Lucci's playing to the melodic flows that are popular now, he's not all that bad at it. I think my biggest issue is that Trouble, an MC who's worked with Lupe Fiasco in his cleaned house, he's stuck sharing a verse with Takeoff, and unfortunately the two of them don't really have a lot of chemistry. But overall though, yeah, it's got some problems, but I don't hate this. Not bad. Number 57, Juju on the Beat, TZ Anthem by Zay, Hilfigerrr, and Zayion McCall.
Hey, okay, I want y'all to do this dance now. Juju on that beat, Juju on that beat, Juju on that, Juju on that, Juju on that beat. Now slide, chop, hit them for no stop, ayy, don't stop, ayy. Don't stop.
No. If you want the track that belongs to the shallow viral trap song of the week here, it's this thing. And for starters, I feel like I'm dealing with a relic from 2015, because these sorts of Vine dance songs haven't nearly been as prominent this year, and that's one of the few good things I can say about 2016 on the charts. That said, I can't really say this song infuriates me as much as Watch Me or Hit the Quan did, mostly because of the underlying sample from a minor crime mob hit from 12 years ago that actually is a shade bit more melodically interesting than it has any right to be. It's not bad, but outside of that scant praise and the fact that neither of these two are remotely as annoying as Silento or I Love Memphis were, there's just nothing to this song. The production sounds painfully cheap even with the good melodic sample. It's yet another dance song that steals dances from other mediocre dance songs. It opens with two of the worst vocal introductions I've heard all year, one with the chipmunk voice effect, and at the end of both verses and the chorus, they insult the listener. Charming, but again, I don't hate or care about this. Neither of these two have the presence to match their more irritating counterparts. Still pretty lousy though. I'd skip this. Number 40, Starboy by The Weeknd featuring Daft Punk.
Look what you done. I'm a motherfucking Starboy. Look what you done. I'm a motherfucking Starboy.
Now this is the collaboration I've been looking forward to covering. And no, not just because it's Daft Punk here, but more because outside of Lana Del Rey, I've got a hard time imagining anyone who could match The Weeknd's retro-leaning impulses much better, especially coming after the end of Beauty Behind the Madness. And Starboy isn't really what I was expecting. Granted, I'm not sure what I could expect at this point from The Weeknd. It's easily one of the most sleek and polished songs that he's ever released, even with the oily bass bounce and the sandy clap of the percussion and minor piano keys, mostly courtesy of the eerie synths that are creeping around the edges. And that's not counting The Weeknd sipping in this smoother upper range, especially with that hook, which I actually really like. But lyrically, this is a tough song to evaluate, mostly because I'm not sure opulence and bragging in this way, especially about cars, is a great look for The Weeknd, even if the chorus drips with sarcasm directed at the audience. After all, we made him a star, enabled his rampant drug use and bragging and debauchery, so why not own all of it? Okay, that's definitely workable, but maybe it's just me, but The Weeknd has always been most interesting when he's stewing in his own emotions and darkness and personal neuroses, with only snapshots of people around him experiencing it secondhand in that darkness. He's got the knack for detail that makes him an interesting storyteller, but this, I hate to say it, but even despite some of the sarcasm, I don't really find this sort of bragging compelling. And sure, the entire point is that The Weeknd doesn't intend for any of this to be all that compelling to the audience. He's criticizing you, but I'm not sure the intent translates completely. In any case, it's definitely a good song, and it seems like the sort that will probably grow on me, but I'm on the fence whether or not it's a great one, or up to the level of his best. We'll see. Number 24, My Way by Calvin Harris.
You are the one thing in my way. You are the one thing in my way. You are the one thing in my way. You are the one thing in my way.
On the flip side, this is a song that I had no interest in covering whatsoever. Most because even post-Taylor Swift breakup, I do not care about Calvin Harris. Especially on a solo track where it's clear that he's brooding over it all with his voice that isn't anything close to being ready for prime time. And when the track started with a minor key shift on piano chords that remind me a lot of Feel So Close, I set myself up for a really tedious listen. But you know what? Turns out this isn't that bad. It's not great or even all that good by any stretch. It's painfully underwritten. And The strings were intended to add bombast to the final hook. Layering in a synth over top did not help whatsoever, but the rattling percussion does add a little bit of groove that translates pretty well into the brighter, slightly clipped guitar line that drives the majority of the song. It's the point where you wish that the bass guitar actually had a little bit more texture to match the rest of the tropical touches in the percussion to really give the song something close to a groove. It's not close to Calvin Harris's best, that'll probably still be outside with Ellie Goulding, but you know what? Decent enough, and if this is what passed for emotional depth coming from Calvin Harris, it could be promising, I suppose. And finally, number 21, Forever Country by artists of then, now, and forever.
I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads.
And here's the big one. The sort of track where if I had a show like Todd in the Shadows, I could easily fill an entire 15-minute episode talking about this song. Because as much as the general public might adore these sort of tracks, and make no mistake, people love this, and they bought it in droves, to make it only the third song in the history of the country charts to debut at number 1, probably end up sticking around. Music critics, we love to talk about these songs and riff on them. Now, in case you don't know, this is a mashup of 3 distinct country tracks. John Denver's Take Me Home, Country Roads from 1971, On the Road Again by Willie Nelson from 1980, and Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You from 1973. Yes, I know the Whitney Houston song has kind of eclipsed it in the popular conscience, but Dolly did write it and went to number 1 twice on the country charts, once in 74 and once in 82, so yeah, it's hers. And this, well, let me give this song a little bit of credit outside of the absolutely hilarious green screen heavy video, because the song itself actually has some decent production with gentle acoustic touches, real pedal steel, and some pretty lush strings and piano behind it. It doesn't sound synthetic or forced, which is probably why the reason why Florida Georgia Line, Sam Hunt, and Thomas Rhett are nowhere near this thing. Now, that said, if you know your country history and are kind of pissed that, say, Chris Stapleton or any modern indie country star like Sturgill Simpson isn't close to the song, I'm not surprised at all. People tend to forget how much the country-politan sound that Dolly and John Denver lived in was loathed by the Outlaws, even Willie Nelson around that time, which is why Chris Stapleton isn't here, but Brett Eldridge of all people is. At least he sounds like he's having fun, which is a hell of a lot more than either Casey Musgraves or Eric Church sound, both of which are the most obvious outcasts here, and of course they were paired with each other on their verse, although the pairing that's driven the most surprise was Luke Bryan and Miranda Lambert, who actually sound pretty decent together, almost completely by accident. Of course, if you parallel that with Jason Aldean sounding like a castrated hamster opposite Willie Nelson, and Blake Shelton looking less like Johnny Cash and more like a mob boss from a mid-2000s exploitation movie, and Carrie Underwood clearly arriving from the year 3016 judging by her outfit, and the fact that Darius Rucker made this song before Garth Brooks, but let me give some credit and say there are a few things that they really did get right. For one, getting Brooks and Dunn, Vince Gill, Martina McBride, Trisha Yearwood, George Strait, and Alabama, that all brought a real smile to my face. And then you follow with both Alan Jackson and Reba. That was a really powerful moment. Both who sounded fantastic, by the way, and far better than Rascal Flatts or Little Big Town, the latter fresh off their pop failure with Pharrell. But it's very telling the most powerful moment in the entire video came less through any of the actual music, and even though he didn't sing, Randy Travis showed up, a sign that even on a superficial level, country still pays tribute to those who came before in a way that so many other genres won't these days. And that's kind of the funny thing. Even though it really is a glorified, over-the-top commercial for the 50th anniversary of the CMAs, one of the most hilarious music videos I've seen in years, I could riff on this thing all day, there's enough good performances and production on the song to save it from being outright laughable crap that'll age poorly in comparison like We Are the World or Do They Know It's Christmas. It's ridiculous, but there's a certain charm to it that I'll admit kind of works for me. Yeah, I'll take it. And that means when we consider the best and the worst this week, I'm going to say it, I'm going to give Forever Country a tie with Starboy by The Weeknd and Daft Punk. After all, both these songs are over the top with slick instrumentation and tremendous ego, but where The Weeknd kind of embraces it and then satirizes it, Forever Country tempers its ego with some heartfelt affection that on some level, yeah, that feels kind of real. As for the worst, it's not even close. Juju on the Beat by those two Z's that I'll forget in a day, but overall, no, I'm not complaining about this week. It wasn't bad. Let's hope for more like this soon. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.